Hello, and welcome to this episode of Security Square, our cybersecurity focused series where we feature analyst insights, expert guests, and we cover the latest news and developments across the security sector. I'm Shelley Kramer, principal analyst here at Kramer&Co. And today I have two guests from Commvault joining me for a conversation that covers a ton of critical ground. We're going to talk about Commvault's ResOps operating model to the newly expanded Satori integration, which brings real-time structured data governance and AI data security into Commvault Cloud. And we're also going to cover the expanded threat scan. You know what, that was really choppy. I'm going to start over. So see, I like to screw up so that it sets the bar really low for you guys, okay? Because I'm the screw up. Okay, so I'm going to start over. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Security Square, our cybersecurity focused series where we feature analyst insights, expert guests, and we cover the latest news and developments across the security sector. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, principal analyst here at Kramer&Co. And today I have two guests from Commvault joining me for a conversation that covers a lot of critical ground. From Commvault's ResOps operating model to the newly expanded Satori integration, bringing real-time structured data governance and AI data security into Commvault Cloud, to the expanded threat scan capabilities announced at RSAC. As I said, we've got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. I'm joined today by Michael Fasulo, Senior Director, Portfolio Marketing at Commvault, and José Gomez, who's the Field CTO of Satori, which is now a Commvault company. This is going to be a great conversation, you guys. You ready to dive in?
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. All right. Michael, welcome back to Security Square.
Thanks for having me.
Always my pleasure to have you on the show. Before we get into the specifics of what Commvault announced at RSAC, would you give our listeners a quick read on the show? What was the energy like? What the themes were?
Sure.
Kind of what was the vibe?
Yeah. So obviously we were a big part of the vibe with our wrestling, massive wrestling ring. We had so much energy around the booth. I think we were spilling all over the place. Like we literally had people when we were running the show itself. And then obviously Jose and I were helping out, doing our thing. So tons of energy. Now, the event itself, there was a huge amount of vendors there. Lots of good sessions. They were very technically deep, obviously, and everything was surrounding AI, which, I think a lot of people had some criticism on, but it was actually refreshing based on, how much AI is in a lot of the conversations that we have with our customers and partners.
Sure.
The other great thing that I've been through a couple RSACs, but I never realized that there's a founder and startup area.
Yeah.
And I was there on day 2 or 3, and I went up there and I was talking to all of these cutting edge companies, super hungry, tons of innovation. And it was super refreshing to just talk to a lot of these startups and understand how they're viewing some of the most modern challenges that our industry is facing. So got lots of good content, had lots of good, deep relationships that I was building there. And these conversations really, continue to extend beyond it. So, everyone willing to kind of talk about what's going on and how it's unfolding in the landscape is, truly inspiring.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you alluded to this, but I will expand that what the Commvault team did at RSAC was so incredibly clever. They built an actual wrestling ring in their exhibit space. And it was so interesting and, captured attention of lots and lots of people. And kudos to the team who concepted that, because it was really, it did draw a lot of people over to the booth and it was really exciting. And like you, I also spent a bunch of time in the startup area. And a lot of what I was thinking walking around is, somebody needs to snap them up. Somebody, you know what I'm saying? There are really some great innovation there and lots and lots to be excited about. What's that?
I wasn't going to say that on camera.
No, but it's true. It's true.
Totally,
a lot of the functionality that they were bringing to the table is stuff that you can easily see how it would slide into an existing.
No doubt.
And that's really, I think, part of the reason you go to events like this is to discover, what's new and exciting on the horizon.
Yep, spot on.
All right, Michael, let's start with ResOps, resilience operations. Okay, so we've talked about this a lot before, but for listeners who may have not heard this framing yet, what exactly is ResOps and why is it a fundamentally different operating model than what most enterprises are used to and what they've been running?
Yeah, I like to look at it as a discipline, right? Like these operating models are really disciplines, and this really helps organizations ensure that they keep their critical services and products and applications uh, up and running, and for most case, protecting them in such a way and securing them in such a way that they can drive next generation resiliency against them, so that when bad things happen, or whether they're traditional things like disasters or whatnot, these applications and their businesses can stay completely up and running and operational. And I'd like to just call out something real quick. Most people think that this is a SKU or a product we sell. It's not, right? These ResOps and this discipline gets delivered by understanding the people, processes, and tools, and puts them in a structured way to deliver those particular outcomes that I just talked about. So this isn't something you buy. And why I feel like it resonates a lot with, a lot of our customers that we've worked with, both in a traditional sense and, some of the new customers that we have, regardless if they're cloud native or, maybe still primarily on-prem, is that it feels familiar because it's what they've been doing, but we've put this process around it that makes it a lot more simpler to understand how the people, processes, and tools play together to drive that outcome.
It's an operating model.
Totally.
I mean, and I think what I am so drawn to is that, in many ways, the old model and what everybody was sort of accustomed to doing was reactive, right?
Totally.
And something breaks and you say, oh crap, and then you recover, right? But ResOps is proactive, and there's that continuous management of resilience. And to me, that checking that box brings a lot of peace of mind.
Way more active. I mean, when we were used to look at the NIST framework, and these frameworks would always put recovery on like the right side. Our philosophy was always put recovery to the left side of bang, right? Like as you're testing recovery and making sure that you're building confidence in it, it really belongs to that left side instead of the reactive restore. You really want that to be like active resilience.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that in this age of AI, we have a wealth of new concerns. And what we're accustomed to in terms of the SecOps identity and backup silos, that, those aren't just an inconvenience when we're talking about an AI environment. They're dangerous. I mean, I think that we know well that attackers look for and exploit those gaps between teams, and it's not hard to do.
Especially not anymore, because you could just use AI to do that. So, the exposure is certainly next generation. And that's why, these operating models and disciplines like ResOps and some of the toolings and how we bring these things together along with the people in the process are critically important, especially as the threat landscape evolves. So although we've moved away from traditional like DR and CR, and we think about, how agents and agentic can play into the threat landscape, all of these things need to come together so that you can properly provide resilience for your organization. And that, again, includes people, processes, and tooling.
Right. Well, and I think the way that I look at it, too, is that ResOps the way that it operates is a closed loop. So you've got this continuous circle of activity and protection and discovering and protecting and detecting and recovering and validate and improving and continuous business.
That's right. That's right.
The piece that I really like about this too is that if you think about from resilience operations about it being a discipline, right? It also includes a lot of those, as you mentioned, SecOps, security operations, and DevOps, and all those other operations in there. So it helps make sure that you're able to use that cohesively along all of that, and to have those specific types of operations you're putting into place actually be displayed and be used and be identified, so you can actually do something, again, as you were just mentioning about the whole resiliency operation cycle.
Totally, Jose. And I think, coming out of SCO this week, one of the SEs that I work pretty closely with, he was telling me about, minimum viability, and now minimum viability is going away with ResOps. And I was like, no, minimum viability is one of the destinations within the ResOps loop. ResOps just becomes the discipline that drives these things. So, this doesn't replace, as to your point, Jose, like it's not replacing all these other frameworks and things. It's really augmenting how these things are viewed to drive continuous resilience as the ultimate goal.
Michael, you kind of dove into my next question. What I wanted to ask here was, frameworks come and go, right? But are you seeing ResOps actually changing? I mean, I know it's kind of early days to a certain extent, but what are you seeing? And you just mentioned your conversation, but are ResOps changing how practitioners think and operate? Is this landing out in the field, or is it still a top-down narrative that we've yet to really get people on board with?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of ResOps, right? Like, we put this discipline and structure and operating model around things that people are already doing. So when we go through the ResOps conversations and we talk about how it provides the operating model to go through resiliency, they're like, oh, I'm already doing this. And we're like, yeah, we know. But it was done, reactively. And now we're saying you need to actively participate in this. And then it'll drive that resiliency that you're actually looking for to deliver. And that happens across the entire loop, whether it's detection or the recovery aspects or the testing aspects. Like, that's why for folks, it's not this, oh my God, I got to learn this whole thing and I need to,
change
learn
everything
discipline from the ground up. It's like, oh, I've been doing this. It just hasn't been, framed in such a way. And, they appreciate that we have the nuances of the people part, because sometimes in an organization, it is messy. And the whole idea of putting that model out there is to make sure that we can kind of put it in this structured way that makes sense and it could work for them. Or it could work for a startup, or it could work for a large legacy enterprise. So, that's where I think the real strength comes, that it's a familiar thing that people are kind of used to doing. And all we've done is put it into the structure that they can understand.
I like it.
And then obviously we could prove that it delivers those outcomes. So that's always the cherry on top for us.
The important part, right?
Yes,
so,
right.
Michael, ResOps is the operating model. What's the platform that's powering it? Help me understand where Commvault Cloud Unity fits in and how this brings everything together at enterprise scale.
All right. So this might be a little charged, my answer, because I'm giving it to you from my point of view.
Okay.
ResOps is not a Commvault thing, right? Like, it doesn't require Commvault tools. However, Commvault Cloud is by far the best platform that can deliver the tools part of ResOps. And why it does that is with, our Commvault Unity launch back in Shift when we were together in November, we talked about how it bridges all the different data silos, right? On-prem, cloud, the hybrid, edge, and everywhere in between, multi-cloud. By us bridging that, it allows our tool to operate within the operating model itself to deliver those outcomes wherever customers may be today, tomorrow, or in the future. So that's why it's critically important. And, when people are like, every product kind of does multi-cloud, kind of does, hybrid, that might be true at the very top level. But, when I look at Commvault and being in all the major clouds, including OCI, across all the different regions, including GovCloud and, China regions and all these other exceptions, when a lot of other organizations make these same claims, the asterisks or multiple asterisks are always there. And then when customers go to use these products and they realize, oh man, I'm operating in GovCloud, I can't use this. Or I'm operating in a data sovereignty area and there's nothing there for me to attach to. You start to get into the nuance where, the Commvault Cloud Unity platform really drives that differentiation. And then with the other pieces of the portfolio being completely embedded, that platform allows them to achieve a lot more of the ResOps framework than they can with other solutions or point solutions or things that they'd have to bolt on. That just adds complexity, cost, and friction.
So we're talking data security, identity resilience, cyber recovery, all under this one architecture.
No doubt. And I'm sure Jose is going to kind of cover that data security aspect that, they've really taken what we've had as a substrate with, our old risk analysis process and product and really take it to the next level to have, a lot more modern databases, bring in deep data discovery and classification to structured data. So, between the two of us, got a really wide swath, and it being all embedded within the Commvault Cloud Unity platform really brings that to next generation. And
Doesn't Unity also integrate with Claude AI and MCP? And why is that a big deal?
Total big deal. Because if you're me and you've been using the product for 22 years, and I love using Claude, I can interface with Commvault through our MCP server directly through Claude.
Okay.
And for me, I'm going to nerd out for just a second. I have lots of MCP servers in my environment, so I can manage my vCenter infrastructure, I could manage my Azure infrastructure, and I can manage my Commvault infrastructure all through Claude, right? So I just load a Claude desktop, it attaches to all the things. I do it in a nice and secure way with, my passwords constantly rotating and my tokens and whatnot. But it allows me a single interface. For a lot of our new customers and even our MSPs, that allows us to kind of remove the frictional burden of having to learn something new, where these things may live inside the environment, and allows them to use natural language to go actually achieve whatever outcome they want, whether it's protecting their laptop, protecting a VM, or whatever. So I look at it as, for power users like me, it gives me a unified way to interface with a whole bunch of different applications and things that I have naturally in my environment. For novice users, it allows them to remove the barrier to learn something new, and they can do it through natural language, which is, absolutely amazing. And if you want a demo, I can certainly show you someday.
Yeah. Oh, no, I love it. I love it. We'll definitely do that. All right. Shifting a bit, let's talk Satori. So I see the Satori acquisition as really a pivotal point where Commvault's capabilities extend from unstructured data into the structured data and AI pipeline world. And of course, this is incredibly important today. Jose, welcome to Security Square. Your first appearance, but definitely not your last.
Thanks, appreciate that. I love it. Looking forward to doing more as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're the global field CTO at Satori, which is now, of course, part of the Commvault family. For our listeners who aren't familiar with Satori, will you give us a quick picture of what Satori does and where it sits in the data security landscape?
Sure. Yeah. So we primarily are in the data security landscape, protecting your data for structured, as you had mentioned, including your AI, some of your AI models, or even the applications that you may be building. So because we're primarily a data and AI security company, based cloud native, allowing you to actually do things on-prem as well, which is a really big differentiator comparative to others out there. But we also have the ability to help protect a lot more of the way the users are accessing the data by providing masking, obfuscation of the data, enforcing policy, data access, governance, and also providing you a lot of blocking capabilities as well within it. So because we're able to do that, as you mentioned here, kind of leading into how we're with Commvault in general, we help tell that complete story, not only just from what you're coming from your backups with the unstructured data side. It makes us very much more powerful because we have now structured and unstructured data in the big picture of even the resilient operations.
Right, right. And this is filling, I think, a critical gap in that whole structured data security, AI training, data governance bucket, right?
Yeah, 100%. Because a
kind of
lot
a
of
big
people
deal.
are building these different types of applications, and they don't know from the data that's being fed into the LLMs is actually something that they want to be fed into it. So if you need to train a model, and if the model contains sensitive information, then that's going to be a problem, especially from an auditing and governance perspective as well.
Right, absolutely. So Jose, one of the headline capabilities in the Satori integration is AI-enabled classification. Walk me through what that actually means in practice. What does it do that security teams couldn't do before?
Well, a lot of teams couldn't do on the fly, which is actually classify data as it's either being ingested or even requested. A lot of time, typical classification tools and even discovery tools, they take samples of data, they put it on the side while things are happening over here in the clouds or whatever transactions are happening. They're doing some analysis on it in the back end, providing you some details about that just on the screen, like, okay, this is what you need to do. And in the meanwhile, all this stuff is already happening. Now, what Satori comes in, being able to be in between those communications that the agents are requesting, or even on behalf of the users, you now have the ability to actually see what the agent requests are that are going in. If when they go in at the same time from a specific request, you'll see that it's automatically classified, oh, that looks like that's PII. You may need to do something with that. Or if there's a policy already in place with it, you have the ability to actually do something meanwhile at the same time to make sure that by the time it goes back to the LLM, that it doesn't even receive there, allowing it even for you to still have the response that you need, that you're looking for.
You know, the thing I think that makes this so important is when you step back and you look at what's actually happening out there, and like something like 90% of organizations have exposed sensitive data that AI can surface, and 46% of all security breaches involve customer PII. So what you're saying is that we allow visibility, and the reality of it is you can't protect what you can't see, but
Exactly.
now you can see it so you can protect it, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, is
Yeah.
because the agents are now acting on behalf of you and the users that are doing something on their machine. So again, as Michael was
Which is
mentioning,
scary.
exactly, he's got
Okay.
Claude doing everything for him right now, right? And so
Right.
he's going into the
No, that
organization,
to me, that's like
right?
scary AF.
And
Yeah.
so not being able to track,
Yeah.
what that is doing when I, or Michael are using something like that to do things on our behalf, grabbing credentials from somewhere, my credentials that I have the ability to view things from, and to not know what it's doing on my behalf is pretty scary, even for me, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm the one that's responsible at the end of the day.
Right.
So being able to have a tool in this and that provides you this visibility, gives you, as you just mentioned, so eloquently, is like
It's big.
helping you understand the visibility of what you can actually see.
And if I could, Shelley, just
Sure.
real quick, Jose doesn't say it as explicit as I want to say it.
This is why we love you, Michael. This is why we love you.
This is my first time. I got to be good over here.
There's so much gravity to what he said, because our customers that we're servicing and that we will continue to service, like new ones, we don't know where they are in that journey. So he's saying we can protect it before it goes into the system, right? Before it goes into their AI app. But what if it's already there? What he just mentioned solves both of those scenarios. So we make no assumptions that PII never made it into the AI app. Maybe someone accidentally vectorized that data.
Right.
That doesn't mean we can't not surface it, right? Like it.
Right.
You want to make sure that if it inadvertently did get in there, you still don't want to give it back. So we could solve that challenge with what he just mentioned. So we protect it from even going in. And if somehow it did make it in there, we can make sure it doesn't come out. So incredibly powerful, because again, people were moving fast. Sometimes they maybe not have had like real good data hygiene. So maybe that data did get vectorized, but you don't want it to be surfaced to your general users. Right. He can obfuscate that single policy, and it works across the entire app. So I wanted to make sure that gets explicitly said, because it's ultimately powerful. And we understand that sometimes customers may be in that scenario. That doesn't mean you have to re-vectorize all that data. We have a tool for you to solve that challenge.
But the other reality, guys, is that these are the wild, wild west days of AI. Come on. And getting arms around data is the number one challenge that every organization of every size has. So to think that you don't have somebody within your organization who's a crazy early adopter, which is a good thing. In many instances, it's a good thing, but who has inadvertently accessed and pulled in some data that, come on, the reality is it's happened.
It's the reality.
So, and so I think that, assuming that that it hasn't is dangerous. But to me, that's what makes this solution such a brilliant one, in that it fixes my past mistakes that I didn't even know that had been made.
And look, those things are going to happen, right?
And that's where data access governance comes in, right? And that's the second piece to this, right? You have the visibility, great. You do the classification, which a lot of companies do. Be honest with those, right? So everyone's doing the discovery and classification piece here, but it's the next piece of it, which is the policy enforcement and the data access governance. Brings that all together to make this truly powerful, basically alluding to exactly what Michael was just mentioning, because that's how we're able to do that and be able to pull things back from that perspective as well.
Right. Well, and I think one other point that I see as a really critical one is that, much like we were talking earlier about the continuous functionality that ResOps brings, is that this is not a one-time scan. Am I correct? It's a continuous classification that's evolving as data grows, as it moves across the enterprise. So it's not just like, oh, check that box, we did it. It's an ongoing thing, right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's correct. And as we were mentioning, is as this data is actually being put in at the same time, right? As we are being able to see every single request as it's going through, automatically applying that real-time speed. So thanks for accentuating that to let you know exactly what it is. So then once you get into the AI LLM, it knows how to respond accordingly because it was only being fed the data it should have been seen in the get-go. So that's what helps that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so we talked a little bit, you mentioned data access governance, real-time control over how structured data is accessed and used. This feels like, to me, based on, my day-to-day conversations, my day-to-day interaction with customers and with vendors and that sort of thing, this feels incredibly urgent right now, given how AI models are touching enterprise data in ways that we never expected, we never anticipated. It's exciting, it's terrifying. What does real-time governance actually look like in practice, Jose?
Well, real-time governance actually in practice is being able to take, first of all, the data that you've already discovered and classified, and being able to take those that you have already set up, put those into policies. And basically, once you have those policies set up, you then have those identities, whether they're non-human, there's agents, the users themselves are now being enforced by those policies you've already taken because of everything you've already discovered and classified, and enforcing them and putting those into place across the data stores that you have on your structured databases.
Right.
So it doesn't matter where they're operating or even accessing this data from, because you have done the pre-leg work of getting all that data classified and discovered, taking those identity of those users and or those agents, and you now put them into a place to where their policies governed around the data stores. It's as simple as that. Now it doesn't matter where they go within the organization, as long as you have those things enforced, whether it's PII, whether it's PHI, accessing anything else that could be leveraging, even from a compliance perspective that you need to govern. You have that now ready for you to go.
Excellent. Now, my last question here is, this is available easily, right?
Oh yeah, we're actually like to announce that we're actually fully integrated in this space here to allow you to use that within the Commvault Cloud
So
platform.
just a single sign-on from the
That's right.
cloud.
That's right.
And my understanding is that it also can be an add-on to any Commvault Cloud package. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of things here, the beauty, and I think the benefit of us being able to do it this way is being able to leverage, as what we're using for risk analysis prior, which is now our data posture 360 is what we're calling that. Being able to give you that visibility of structured and unstructured. You now have the standalone piece of it, which is our data access manager, which allows you to be able to, even if you don't have this side of the house of the full backup scenario of resilience operations, because you may be early in those days, you still want to help protect your structured data in a way that you can get in there easily with as you're working with your high available applications, whether you're on the cloud or even on-prem. This is something that can help you get supported quickly.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, Jose. The third element I want to explore is the integration of data visibility and access controls directly into cyber resilience and recovery workflows. Why does this connection matter? Like, most organizations have thought of governance and recovery as maybe completely separate disciplines.
As part of, we were just mentioning, as the resilience operations you're trying to put and discover, detect, protect, and try to make sure you have when you wanted to be able to do something and act, right? Unifying this actually gives you the controls to be able to allow you to have your recovery workflows work for you as opposed to against you, right? And because it'll help you reduce the data risk within your environment before an incident actually happens, and provides you details to help you understand of what you need to do next and help you recover more quickly. Because if you don't know where things are, whether it's in unstructured and structured data before an attack happens, how do you know what to protect?
Well, and how do you know that when you think you've recovered, that you've actually completely recovered?
Exactly, because you don't know exactly what things have been touched or what things may have disappeared. So being part of the front of boom, or left or right of boom, however you want to look at it. Being part of that whole process and that flow of data coming in, data being backed up, data being scanned as it's in real time. Also, things constantly be worked on, even in the back end, to ensure that there's nothing that could have potentially gotten in by other means. Being able to be a part of that whole life cycle of the data and the user's interactivity with it is very important to be able to have this as part of your cyber recovery.
Got it. Got it. So I have another question. When you're talking with enterprises who are actively rolling out AI agents, RAG architectures, LLM powered applications, that sort of thing, what risks are they facing that they might not fully see yet?
I would say that most enterprises already know, and they have controls already in place that allow them to be able to give visibility into the way users are being active in their organization, right? But what they don't know really about this is actually how the AI agents are using them as well within that. So,
which is even scarier than humans.
Exactly, because from a compliance perspective, right, you're not going to, how do you know, and you can ensure and to report back to your auditors what you're actually doing and what your users are actually doing, whether it's GDPR, DORA, or anything else, because they need to know who's touching data, if it is a user, if it is a non-human user, agent, AI, whatever, you need to be able to report on it, and then also be able to report on it quickly, because you don't want to spend days, you don't want to spend months, you want to rather do days. You can just try to fill out some type of form that says, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. You don't want to go to DBAs that have them go out and be like, okay, what's going on? You get that data in spreadsheets. It can take a long time. I know from doing it myself. You don't want to.
Absolutely. So it sounds like what we're looking at is a situation where the question is shifted from, is our data backed up, to we know where all our sensitive data lives, and we know who and what, including agents, are accessing it. And, we have a path to knowing how we can recover cleanly.
Exactly.
That's kind of the holy grail.
And it's all policy driven.
Yeah.
Right. So this isn't bespoke, hand tooling these things on the fly, right? These policies are being used to, not only keep these things on guardrails, but to really provide that predictable outcome that Jose is really talking about. So, the fact that it could span across all these different data silos within a single tool just provides, organizations a single way to provide the governance and, responsibility and security that they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we move on, let's give our listeners the practical picture. What's available now? What's on the roadmap?
Well, I can tell you that data access governance is available now. So we mentioned with real-time controls and access to your structured data. Also part of the single sign-on as part of the Commvault Cloud that we have. And it's also part of it as an add-on package. We also do have the structured and unstructured data capabilities, as I mentioned before, as our Data Posture 360. That's available right now, which has the same type of governance that you've been using from your Commvault, cloud resiliency platform you've already been using, bringing that into what you're getting from your unstructured and structured data in a single pane of glass, the widely used term that everyone's using nowadays.
Right.
But it gives you that straight visibility as to what you can actually see right now. So both of those are available today. And what's coming down the line, we have a lot of different functionalities that's going to help allow you to be able to manage a lot of this through natural language as well.
I love it. Anything you want to add there, Fasulo?
Yeah. And if you call the number that you see listed below, you will get Fasulo and Jose on the phone, and we'll show you how this works beginning to end. It's truly like the combination of the two products working together, bringing, what we've done for over a decade with unstructured data and partial structured data to what, Satori now brings into the platform, providing that single unified experience is really going to allow people to get real good controls, like the far left side of understanding what is going on in their environment, where their data may have some sensitivity to it, rank it appropriately, and then apply a single policy. It's exactly what these companies on their AI journey need.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I had a mic so I can drop that for you.
I tried to improvise with, my boom. Okay. So guys, as we wrap up, Michael, the other major RSAC announcement was around the expansion of Commvault Cloud Threat Scan with layered intelligence-driven threat hunting.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about these expanded threat capabilities. And before we get into the specifics, help me frame the problem. We know attacks can dwell undetected in environments for weeks. What does that mean specifically for data backup and recovery operations?
It means you need lots of different signals to find lots of different evolving ways that things go sideways.
Yeah.
And, whether we're talking about hyper threat hunting as an example, or, how our platform has all these different ways for us to expose anomalies and things that are going on in the environment, and then share them in such a way that both traditional IT folks that are managing backup or SOC analysts can use these signals to really paint a very clear, high fidelity picture of what's happening in the environment and then respond accordingly. And then obviously with our platform, not only are we responding accordingly, we're responding with speed, accuracy, and cleanliness. So, that's how these particular components work together. Now, specific to hyper threat hunting, why that's important is it's probably the first or second set of signals you're going to get. Right. And this doesn't replace, EDR and XDRs that are sitting, on your infrastructure today. This augments those things. And why it's important is because finding threats and the time in which you respond is absolutely critical, especially when we talk about AI-powered threats. And I know Jose kind of talked about that for just a split second, but the things that are happening so fast that your reaction time and the accuracy of that reaction time is absolutely critical. So hyper threat hunting came because we needed a way to get a fast signal that we can then use other tactics to then paint a much more clearer picture, but it at least gives us the picture. So I always talk about like a crime scene, right? When you first show up, hyper threat hunting is your equivalent of you're scanning the environment. Maybe you're taking some really wide angle pictures, right? It's just enough to go, yep, something happened here. And that's what hyper threat hunting is. And it uses hashes and it uses YARA rules that your security team may provide you that we can embed into our system so that as we're continuously scanning, right? It's not a one-time scan. We're continuously scanning for these things. It allows us to get the first set of pictures and we go, yep, something happened. Now that we know something happened, now we start to step through other pieces of the portfolio with, deeper scanning or deep inspection scans, or using a combination of, threat signals coming from other, like your SIM or SOC, to then say, hey, I have third-party signals coming in too. Yes, something drastically happened. And then as we go through that, now you're starting to send the pictures and things to the investigators, and they're going, yep, I see what's going on in the environment. And now I know that we have to respond, and we have to respond with X, Y, and Z because we have a clear positive scenario that this thing specifically went wrong. So
okay, I'm going to stop you. Here's why. You are doing a great job of answering these questions, but what you're doing is answering questions I haven't yet asked. And why that is important is because I want to be able to have an answer on the specific threat scan capabilities.
Okay.
And then I want to ask you another question about threat scan and hyper threat hunting. And then I want to ask you another question about deep inspection. Okay. So you've done all the right things, but I'm thinking ahead to how I want to be able to break this up and use this finished product. So I'm going to ask you the question again.
Okay.
And I'm just going to start with, I'm going to start at the beginning. So I'm going to ask you about, the other major announcement was Commvault Threat Scan. So one, we're going to set up the story with the problem it solves.
Yep.
Next, I'm going to ask you about hyper threat hunting. And then I'm going to ask you about deep inspection. Make sense?
Yep. Now you're not going to get the analogy though.
You can fit that in somehow.
Nope, you can't. It's one-time deal.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
It's fine. All right, here we go. All right, Michael, as we wrap up, the other major RSAC announcement was around the expansion of Commvault Cloud Threat Scan with layered intelligence-driven threat hunting. So let's talk about these expanded threat scan capabilities. And before we get into the specifics, help me frame the problem. We know attacks can dwell undetected in environments for weeks. What does this mean specifically for data backup and recovery operations?
Yeah, so hyper threat hunting really addresses the speed. And Jose was talking before about the identity space and understanding, like, as agentic and AI threats are powering the speed portion of these threats. It's really important that you get those signals so that you can respond accordingly, minimize the blast radius, and then get to good, clean recovery. So hyper threat hunting is all about how can we provide a medium fidelity signal so that we have good indicators before we step to the rest of the portfolio. Something is going wrong and I actually need to respond. So with hyper threat hunting, using hashes and YAR rules are incredibly fast and efficient. It's like we can do a couple million file scans in just a minute or two. So this provides us a very quick way to get a signal. And then we use parts of the portfolio to start doing the deeper ones to get a higher fidelity understanding of what's happening. And then we respond accordingly.
So what we're solving for here, and the challenges I think that security teams have are a couple of things. So you've got, and this number always makes my blood run cold, but you've got a situation where the median dwell time for a non-actor disclosed breach is 24 days.
That's
okay,
right.
So think about that. Attackers have 24 days worth or more of opportunity to embed malicious code, including your backup environments, right? And so then you've also got security ops teams, and they may have IOC and IOA intel data that's tied to specific indicators of compromise, but maybe that intelligence isn't applied across backup data before restoration begins. Also makes the blood run cold, right?
Yes.
And so then you've got the visibility problem, which of course is a big challenge. And I think a lot of times people think, well, we have good backups, but the reality of it is, do you have verified clean backups? Because I think usually there's a gap there, right? So to me, that's what makes this hyper threat hunting capability such a very big deal.
That's right. And it's continuous. So, as environments are constantly in flux and in changing, it running continuous is super important. And then I would say, people are most concerned with the speed in which they can respond, the cleanliness that you just mentioned, and also the fidelity of the signal, so that, having tons of false positives sitting in the SOC is not helpful either. And it's very distracting. And we actually go through one of these scenarios in our minutes to recovery, event that we do, or it's coming soon. We did the trial run this week, so it's fresh in my mind. But at the end of the day, these are the things that people are worried about when we talk to customers and partners. These are the things that they need. So there's all these different pieces of the portfolio that help get us to that high fidelity, high speed, high cleanliness aspect. And then again, we make no assumptions and we meet our customers where they are. So we can send these same signals into the SOC. We can take those signals into the Commvault platform and combine them with it so that we can get really high accuracy, and then make sure that we respond with the right tactics and capabilities.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that I see that it's so critical to solve for is that, you've got incident response and you've got recovery teams, right? And you've got security teams. And this kind of functionality allows everyone to work from the same threat intelligence. So we're breaking down those silos within organizations, which I think is incredibly important.
Absolutely. It's a team sport, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We've been saying that for years. It's an absolute team sport.
Yeah.
But again,
absolutely.
even with the team sport, you just don't want to make assumptions, right? We have customers that are, small mom and pop shops, and then we have large enterprise. So the tooling is extremely flexible to power all of those scenarios and everything in between. And the idea is that whether we're generating signals or, the EDR, XDR, any of these other applications are generating signals, how do we provide a substrate that allows everyone to, orchestrate recovery from those things with accuracy? So we have run books that sit into the SIEM and SOAR platform. So whether you're using Palo Alto XSOAR or Next Gen SIEM with CrowdStrike, or even Microsoft Sentinel, These tools are incredibly powerful because those vendors are also building, agentic flows and AI on top of them. So by us providing those runbooks, we provide the strength of our platform in everyone's hands. And if everyone's moving from the same set of truths, everything can happen fast. You can get your threat actors out, you can cleanly recover, and you don't have to pay the ransom.
Right. I think the other thing that's a significant part of the Commvault value prop as a whole, for me, from the outside looking in, is that you really are able to and passionate about meeting customers where they are. So you can be listening to this, all of these solutions and this amazing functionality, and please don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, they're too big for me, my company's much smaller, or whatever. But the reality of it is, you meet customers where they are.
Totally.
And you work alongside them as they grow and scale and their needs change and their company grows. And I think that's really, really important when you're looking for a vendor to partner with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that the whole team sport, applies with us and our partners too, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can't do it alone. They have just capabilities that, we would never build. And by using them and partnering with best of breed companies and providing good frictionless, integrations, everyone gets the benefit.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, the one persona that doesn't get the benefit is the threat actors. And we're extremely proud of that.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So deep inspection is the second part of the second scanning mode. So this feels
Yes.
like it's designed for sophisticated threat actors who specifically engineer their payloads to evade known IOCs. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's how you get to that 24-day dwell time, right? Like,
Okay.
so you have this gradient of threat signals, and once you start to get these high fidelity signals, that's when you got to pull out the real high firepower stuff, and that's really what our deep inspection is. And
Okay.
why that's important is because with AI powered threats and polymorphic threats and 0 days, like in the news cycles, and you see CVEs all the time, you want to be able to discover these types of things before you recover. And that's where deep scan comes in. So we would use the deep scanning capabilities that really detect those subtle nuances and go, hey, we have a lot of these signals, whether they're third party or from the platform or they're just anomalies. We use the deep scanning and we find it. And then once that's flagged, we make sure that that cannot be recovered unless it could be recovered in a safe location like our clean room. So not only does it find these threats and flags the encrypted data, it will also change the default behavior of the product so that doesn't get recovered unless you tell it to be recovered for forensic purposes. So it does a couple things beyond just the scanning. It actually changes the way we do recovery.
I like it. So one of the things that I find most compelling about this announcement is the integration of these threat detection capabilities directly with Commvault's synthetic recovery tech, right?
Yes.
So talk me through what that connection looks like and why this verified clean recovery, not just fast recovery, is really the right goal.
All right. How much time we got? Because I could go on for about 10 minutes. This is my favorite stuff to talk about. So we talked about our threat signals, right? We got all these signals that are saying something's not right. We then use our deep scanning and we go, yep, there's a bunch of stuff not right. And then, oh, by the way, we have some encrypted data. And this is happening maybe across a certain period of time. So now we have multiple backups that are affected, and including the latest backup, right? So now we have the string of backups. They have varying degrees of good files and bad files and all these other things. By us combining all of these signals, we get a really clear picture of what is going on that machine. We use that information to drive our synthetic recovery feature. And what that does is it builds a composite, the cleanest possible composite you can have. And it says, take all the latest data that's good, find versions of the data that's been compromised in the prior backups that aren't compromised, build a synthetic recovery point so that it's as clean and uncorrupted as possible, and allow my user to recover that. And we can put that in place. We can put that out of place. Or if you have paranoid people like me, you can go put it into the clean room to further verify that it's the cleanest, most uncompromised recovery point that I can get, and then I can get my data back. Once I validate it, then I can go push it into production. So that's the secret sauce of synthetic recovery. And lots of companies call what they have synthetic recovery, but only ours is truly unique in the fact that it will absolutely build that composite recovery of the most uncompromised files. It'll exclude the malware so the threat actors aren't getting back in, and it'll allow you to recover that back into production.
Yeah, and what I think is a very compelling point to this as well is that even coming from the structured data world, where I've been going into the unstructured data world, is that what we have here is actually it's a differentiation here, because not only do we have the ability to find the threats, be able to do something, we can actually, because we know where they are, whether it is in your structured and unstructured data, we can actually recover you quickly, right? That's one big difference. A lot of people can do the piece of it and find this data and do these things, but they don't find it quickly.
And time is money.
Right,
That's
exactly.
right.
And so that's our goal here. And I think that that's very, what Michael was just mentioning there is very important. And I know something that I've found very valuable. And I think that customers would find that as well.
This is why we're a great tag team. If I had to give like a wrestling analogy, we're probably the Rockers, from the 80s and 90s. I could be Shawn Michaels, I guess.
There you go. I'll take it.
But at the end of the day, right, it's a great point, because what did people do before synthetic recovery, right? Even Commvault customers, they used to do stepped restores, right? They would restore the latest, they would restore the prior one, they restore the prior one, or in the worst case, they would roll a snapshot back and accept the data loss. Now this is no compromise. And it's done all behind the scenes with how threat scanning and clean recovery and turbo threat hunting all work together, so that the customer just clicks the reset button, the restore button, and they get it. And it actually surfaces the accuracy and how many files we're going to pull forward. So it gives them even data so that they can make the right decision at that moment in time, especially if you think about, recovering from an active threat. The last thing you want to do is not have confidence in that data. And that's what these subtle things that we do and bring together actually give you. You get good, clean, trusted recovery.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So, Michael, what is the practical availability picture for the new threat scan capabilities?
You already got it. You're on the latest version of
Commvault. So it's available globally, standalone.
Available globally, part of the threat scan product.
Okay.
So if you got threat scan, you already have it.
Well, and even better, if you've got threat scan, you've got hyper threat hunting and deep inspection capabilities at no additional cost.
You got both. You got both. That's part of our platform promise, right? Like these things are meant so that we can drive good, clean, trustable recovery. So whether we're talking about PQC like we did last time, part of the platform, we want to make sure that people are being able to prevent paying that ransom. So that's why these capabilities available now. Go out and get it. And if you have a security team that wants to, provide you with your rules and things, now the platform allows you to put them in. Every time we run a scan, it'll allow you to use those YAR rules, and good to go. Good to go.
Yeah. And one other point I want to make on this is I mentioned that threat scan is available globally, but it's available as either a standalone offering or as part of Commvault's cyber resilience bundle. And I think that's important too.
Yes.
So,
look, just like we talk about removing friction for our users, we want to make sure that gets extended to, how even people are purchasing, the product. And again, with people on broad spectrum, we know that, if a mom and pop shop really needs these capabilities for their use cases, no problem, or large enterprise for that matter. So, by us putting them in the bundle, it's like, I want this outcome, no problem. We have the bundle for you. You don't have to worry about the bits and pieces. And, if you're using the latest version of the product, these things work completely seamlessly. Like you can just tell the product to go do a synthetic recovery, tell it to go into the clean room. It'll spin up the clean room and run all the automation all by itself. So these things are highly automated and orchestrated together. So if you haven't checked it out lately, like maybe you use the V1 versions of these things, please check it out again, because the user experience is drastically different. It's really amazing. It's really amazing.
Awesome. All right, Michael and Jose, as we wind down, I need one last quick take from each of you. And my question here is, what's the one thing you want security and IT leaders listening to this conversation to walk away thinking about? Not necessarily about Commvault specifically, but about how they need to think differently about the intersection of AI, data governance, and resilience right now. Jose, lay it on us.
So the biggest thing is that data is moving fast. Users are moving fast. Before they weren't able to do anything with it very quickly. Now they're overproductive because they're using AI. And so because of that, visibility into your data is very important, because if you don't have that visibility as to who's accessing it, what's accessing it, how are they accessing it, how can you make sure that you are protecting your sensitive assets? So whatever
you can't protect what you can't see.
Exactly. So whatever you're going to be looking for, just keep that in mind as you're planning out your security controls around your data. Just be sure to try to look at finding that visibility, because that's very important these days.
All right. Fasulo, I know it's hard for you to narrow in on one, but you're going to do it.
I'm going to say the same thing I always say. Don't sweat the basics. They're super, super important. I mean, I even saw an article again today that, they had sensitive data sitting in a public bucket, right? I know it's not a sexy thing, but the basics, regular encryption, making sure things are private, making sure things are locked down, making sure you're changing, admin accounts and obfuscating this data, having a good set of foundational things that we use to secure data is ultra important. And then use the stuff that Jose said right after the fact to make sure these things are locked down and you understand where the data is. So, right before we get to data discovery and classification and securing that, like, just secure the infrastructure. A lot of people forget to do that. And then it's like, look, okay, they got access to it. Now, fortunately for us, encryption is on by default and we have our own proprietary format. So there's a little more safety angle to that. But, for customers and organizations that are storing these things, the basics are still very critically important, especially with AI being able to find ways around, human inventions, right? Like AI was a great way to find different ways around obstacles. A lot of things you can't circumvent are still the basics, like encryption and locking things down. So I continue to stress to people, do a quick security posture scanning of things and lock things down. And then use the stuff that Jose said, really get a good understanding of your data, and then further lock it down and apply policies that, make sure that they address your regulatory or your business needs.
Right. The way that I think about this is that all of this is important, incredibly important.
Yes.
But as we add AI into the mix, and we're all doing it, and we're all at different stages of that journey, it's like 100x more important, because we're not just talking about humans. Now we're talking about agents and that sort of thing. So that's how I think about it in terms of if you're thinking about when the right time is, the answer is now.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's never too late. Never too late to do these things.
You need to take control before it takes control of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, that's a wrap for this episode of Security Square. A huge thank you to Michael Fasulo and Jose Gomez for joining me today. We covered a ton of ground, from ResOps as an operating model to the Satori integration and what it means for structured data and AI security, to the expanded threat scan capabilities that are literally redefining what verified clean recovery looks like. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a fabulous conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm Shelley Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer&Co. Thanks for listening to Security Square, and we'll see you here next time.